In the late 1950s, a company put a pill on the market and called it the safest medicine ever made. You couldn't overdose on it, it left no hangover, and it was gentle enough, they said, to hand to a pregnant woman for her morning sickness. The pill was a sedative called thalidomide. Within a few years, in maternity wards across Europe, babies were being born with their arms and legs shrunk to small flippers, hands and feet set almost straight onto the shoulders and hips. It is remembered now as the poison that was sold as a cure. There's a cartoon version of this. An evil company, a monster drug, thousands of ruined children. That version is true enough, and it is also the least useful thing about the story, because what happened next is the reason a modern doctor can hand you a prescription and mean it when they say it's safe. Almost the entire machinery that now stands between you and a dangerous drug was built out of this one catastrophe. The strangest part waits at the very end, where the monster turns into a medicine that is still saving lives today. Thalidomide came out of West Germany, sold under the name Contergan. Set against the sleeping drugs of the day, it looked like a real advance. The barbiturates people took at night could kill them in overdose, and this new pill seemingly could not, no matter how much someone swallowed. A sedative you couldn't die from sounded like mercy. It sold across dozens of countries, some of them over the counter. The use that would matter most was the quietest one on the label, the nausea of early pregnancy. Look at what that claim actually asks of a drug. To give a drug to a pregnant woman is to promise it is safe for the one patient medicine guards more carefully than any other, the one who has not yet been born. What almost no one understood was that the danger was a matter of timing. Taken in a narrow stretch of early pregnancy, somewhere around the 5th to 7th week, the very days when the small buds of the arms and legs are being laid down and told how far to grow, the drug reached into that process and halted it part way. A few days of exposure at the wrong moment, and children were born with limbs cut short or absent, and with damage to ears, eyes, hearts, and the organs inside. For a while, the cause stayed hidden. Wards across Europe kept meeting the same rare pattern, and no one could say where it came from. The break came from two doctors who never met, an ocean apart. Wedekind Lenz, a pediatrician in West Germany, and William McBride, an obstetrician in Australia, who each traced the malformations back to the same pill and said so independently in 1961. How many children were harmed in total we will probably never know for certain. The figure repeated most often is around 10,000 worldwide, though the number I would actually stand behind is the one West Germany counted on its own soil, close to 4,000 there alone. The drug came off the shelves, country by country. Here the easy story and the honest one-part ways. The easy story is that nobody bothered to test it, that the people behind it were careless or barbaric. I'd ask you to slow down on that, because it isn't only wrong, it's the wrong lesson to learn. Thalidomide was tested. The trouble is that it is a ferocious teratogen in human beings and very nearly harmless to the animals it was tried on. The rats and mice of the day took it and were mostly fine. The tests that existed could not have caught it because the harm was hiding in the gap between one species and another. That is the kind of error that should unsettle a physician far more than plain negligence. Everyone did what the knowledge of their moment demanded, and it still was not enough. It is a warning about the limits of testing itself, because a test can only answer the question someone already thought to ask. In one country, almost none of it happened because a single person refused to sign. Frances Kelsey was a physician and pharmacologist who joined the United States Food and Drug Administration in 1960, and the thalidomide application reached her desk as one of her very first assignments. Everyone expected a formality. The drug was already selling around the world. The paperwork was meant to sail through. Kelsey read it, judged the evidence behind it thin, and asked the company for more. They pushed. She asked again. For months, she would not put her name to it, under real pressure from a manufacturer watching a fortune sit on the far side of her signature. That was not stubbornness. It was the principle the whole modern system now rests on: proof before belief. Roughly a year into the standoff, the reports broke out of Europe, and the drug she had been holding back proved to be the one deforming children. Thalidomide never reached American pharmacies, and a generation of American children were spared it. In 1962, President Kennedy gave her one of the nation's highest civilian honors for sparing, in the words of the citation, perhaps thousands from death or lasting harm. Saving one country was not the end of it. Looking at how narrow the miss had been, the United States rewrote the rules themselves. Until then, a company mostly had to argue that a drug was safe. It did not have to prove the drug actually worked. It took this disaster to change that. The Kefauver-Harris amendments of 1962 required, for the first time, that a new medicine show both that it was safe and that it did what it promised. The clinical trials, the phase studies, the safety monitoring, the pregnancy warnings a doctor like me reads almost without thinking. A good part of that apparatus is scar tissue from this one disaster. We built the modern idea of drug safety on top of the children thalidomide harmed. And then the strangest turn, the molecule came back. In 1965, a doctor noticed that thalidomide could quiet a brutal complication of leprosy. Later, researchers found it could starve tumors by shutting down the growth of the new blood vessels they need to survive. I'm a vascular surgeon. Blood vessels are the material I work in every day, and there is a grim symmetry here that I still find hard to sit with. The same property that made thalidomide wreck a growing limb. Its power to choke off new vessels and tissue is what turned it decades later into a genuine treatment for multiple myeloma, a cancer of the blood. In 1998, the FDA licensed it again, deliberately, this time hedged with the strictest pregnancy prevention program it had ever attached to a drug. Half a century after the disaster, in 2010, researchers finally reached the answer that had hung over all of it. Thalidomide fastens onto a protein inside our cells called Cereblon, part of the machinery a developing embryo uses to build a limb. That single finding did more than explain an old tragedy. It opened a way of designing drugs that laboratories are still building on now. So when this story reaches you flattened into a cartoon, the wicked company and the monster pill, remember that you are being handed the smallest version of it. A drug carries no morality of its own. What it turns out to be depends on the dose, the moment, the person taking it, and whether anyone built a system strong enough to hold it. Thalidomide is where medicine learned, at a price that should never have been paid, that it looks safe and we know it is safe, are not the same sentence. It is the reason first, do no harm, is no longer only a phrase a doctor recites, but something the law requires us to prove. That protection did not come from a laboratory. It came from a disaster and from a woman who would not sign her name. There is another story already here on the channel that rhymes with this one. Young women, a glowing paint sold as harmless, and a company that already knew what it did. That is the one to watch next.